Thanks for bringing us this stack of fascinating sources on one of America's really enduring mysteries. When you think of Lizzie Borden, your mind probably jumps straight to that iconic nursery rhyme. Lizzie Borden took an axe.
And gave her mother 40 whacks.
Yeah,
Yeah, everyone knows it.
exactly. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. But here's where we immediately start our deep dive today by, well, correcting a few pretty crucial errors in that catchy little jingle.
Important ones.
First, it wasn't her mother she allegedly struck, it was her stepmother, Abby.
Right. Big difference in the family dynamic there.
And second, the number of blows, way off, significantly less. Andrew Borden received, what, 11 or 12?
Yeah, 11 or 12 for Andrew, and Abby got it worse. Between 18 and 19 blows. Still horrific, but not the neat 40 whacks of the rhyme.
It's remarkable, isn't it, how a popular rhyme can just completely override actual historical fact.
Oh, absolutely. It really speaks volumes about how deep the myth goes and, how quickly we accept a catchy narrative over, well, complex truths.
It really does. And beyond just the botched facts of the jingle, what's truly astonishing here and what we really want to unpack is how the very idea of a proper woman ended up being Lizzie's most formidable defense.
Almost overshadowing the physical evidence.
Yeah, even the bloodiest evidence.
Mm-hmm.
So today on the Deep Dive, we're unpacking one of America's most infamous unsolved mysteries. The 1892 Borden family murders, and of course, the sensational trial of Lizzie Borden.
And we've pulled from quite a stack of sources for this. We've got academic analyses, things from Tulane University, Psychology Today.
Right, and historical newspaper accounts from the time, which are fascinating, and even some intriguing Reddit discussions looking at how people see it today.
Exactly. And our mission really is to move beyond just the whodunit, though we'll touch on that, and examine how the societal norms of the late 19th century, especially around gender and class, profoundly shaped everything.
Everything from public perception, the legal proceedings.
And, yeah, ultimately, Lizzie Borden's acquittal. We really think you're going to walk away from this with a truly well-informed perspective on this enduring legend.
And what's particularly striking, I think, is how these very same dynamics, these biases, they still echo, don't they, in our justice system, in media portrayals of women today.
They really do. This isn't just dusty history. It's kind of a mirror to our own time.
Okay, so to really grasp the motivations and perceptions at play here, we first need to kind of transport ourselves back. Fall River, Massachusetts, late 19th century.
Right. It was once a fairly humble mill town, but then with steam engine technology really taking off, it just transformed, became one of the most prominent hubs for the textile industry in the whole country.
And that industrial growth led to, well, a lot of money, right? A substantial increase in concentrated wealth among these leading families.
Like the Bordens. Exactly.
Yeah.
Andrew Borden, the patriarch, he was a classic self-made man, just shy of 70 when he died.
And he'd done well for himself. Amassed a considerable fortune. What was it, about $300,000 back then?
Yeah, in 1892, money, which today you're looking at roughly $10 million. So serious wealth. But he was known for being meticulous with his investments, extremely careful with money.
Careful, bartering on.
So cheap.
Some definitely said penurious, yeah. Very frugal, despite the wealth.
So, okay, we have this wealthy family, but as the saying goes, money doesn't always buy happiness, right? The family dynamics here seem absolutely critical.
Oh, crucial. Andrew's first wife, Sarah, she died when Lizzie was quite young. And his remarriage to Abby Gray was, well, by all accounts, pretty much one of convenience. There wasn't a lot of love there.
And that convenience certainly didn't extend to Andrew's daughters, did it?
No, not at all. Neither Lizzie nor her older sister, Emma. And they were 32 and 42, by the way. Both unmarried, still living at home. They never really took to Abby.
Never warmed up to her.
Not even close. The daughters never even called her mother. Lizzie famously stated, and this came out later, "She is not my mother. She is my stepmother. My mother is dead."
Wow. Pretty stark. And that resentment just deepened over time, particularly when Andrew bought a property for Abby's sister, but put it in Abby's name.
Ah, so the daughters saw that as money that should have been theirs eventually, cutting into their inheritance.
Exactly. That was a huge point of contention.
And Lizzie herself, she wasn't exactly playing the typical role for a woman of her class and time, was she?
No, definitely not. Despite the family's wealth, she didn't, maintain the household in the traditional sense. She wasn't actively seeking a suitor, didn't have children.
What was she known for then?
She was apparently known to manipulate her father quite effectively for material gains. And she had what people described as a vivid and difficult personality.
Difficult.
Yeah, and her unfeminine tendencies, as they were called, were actually critiqued quite openly in Fall River society. She didn't fit the mold.
And what about her public image generally?
Not great, honestly. People who knew her apparently described her as quite uninteresting and rather unpleasant, even competitive.
And wasn't there some trouble before the murders, like run-ins with the law?
Yes, that's right. Her image was further tarnished in the years leading up because of several interactions with local police for, like, petty theft and
Oh,
shoplifting.
shoplifting.
Yeah. So this was hardly the picture of a demure, perfectly behaved Victorian woman, even before the terrible events.
Okay, so we've got this backdrop. A wealthy, prominent family, but one simmering with deep unhappiness and tension. Now let's fast forward to the day itself, August 4th, 1892.
The scene is the Borden home on 2nd Street. Emma, Lizzie's older sister, she's conveniently out of town visiting friends.
Right, and there was a guest?
Yes. Andrew's former brother-in-law, John Morse. He was an unexpected overnight guest, which adds another layer. And the family maid, Bridget Sullivan.
She was there, but outside.
Exactly. She was outside washing windows, which meant she wasn't inside the house when things happened.
That's critical. So walk us through the discovery.
Okay, so Abby Borden was found first, upstairs in the guest bedroom. She'd been bludgeoned 19 times.
19. Horrific.
Yeah. And the estimation was she'd been dead for about an hour, maybe a bit more, before Andrew was discovered.
And Andrew was found downstairs.
Downstairs, yeah. On the living room couch. He'd been struck 12 times.
Just brutal. And the state of the bodies.
Awful. Neither victim was facially recognizable. Some early newspaper reports used phrases like, hacked to pieces. The sheer violence is hard to even comprehend.
And critically, Lizzie was the only person confirmed to be inside the house during the time both murders likely occurred.
That's the key point. Her
Yes.
alibi. She claimed she had gone out to the barn for a bit, supposedly to look for fishing sinkers.
Fishing sinkers. And what about Bridget, the maid? Did she hear anything?
Well, Bridget's testimony later included something interesting. She said she heard Lizzie laugh from upstairs, around the time Abby was likely killed, and presumably near where Abby's body was later found. This was shortly before Lizzie apparently told Bridget that Abby had received a note and gone out.
A laugh. That's chilling, if true.
It is. But what's truly remarkable, though, is that initially, Lizzie wasn't an immediate suspect.
Really? Despite being the only one inside?
Yeah. The initial focus, partly because of the sheer brutality, shifted elsewhere. Police and the public looked towards a Portuguese laborer seen in the area, or maybe some unidentified tall man.
Because the crime seemed too masculine.
Exactly. It was sort of masculinized in the public imagination right away. They were looking for a certain type of killer, and Lizzie just didn't fit that image at first.
You know, it's almost unbelievable, isn't it, how many crucial mistakes were made right from the very start of this investigation?
Oh, it's textbook poor police work, really.
We're talking about unauthorized people just wandering around the Borden home for hours.
Contaminating evidence, tracking blood around. Yeah. The crime scene itself was never officially roped off or secured properly by the investigators.
It was a disaster from a forensic standpoint, wasn't it?
Absolutely. And this initial oversight, combined with, frankly, a lack of attention paid to emerging leads concerning Lizzie, it severely weakened the investigation right from the get-go.
So initially, the police focused elsewhere.
Yeah, they looked at John Morse, the visiting uncle, and Bridget the maid. But both had pretty solid alibis confirmed by eyewitnesses, placing them outside the house during the likely times of the murders.
Which left Lizzie.
Which left Lizzie as the only person present whose alibi, her trip to the barn, was entirely rooted in her own word. No corroboration.
And yet, despite this incredibly incriminating reality, neither the police nor the public initially saw Lizzie as a serious suspect.
It's quite telling. Her clothes weren't even seized or examined for blood initially.
Even though she was seen carrying something out later, a dress.
Yes, she was seen carrying a morning dress wrapped in pink paper out of the upstairs later that day. A huge potential piece of evidence just missed.
But the police did interview Lizzie several times, didn't they?
Oh, yes. And it was the inconsistencies, the discrepancies in her statements during those interviews that first really started to raise suspicions among the investigators.
What kind of inconsistencies?
Well, her stories about being in the barn kept changing. She told different officers varying accounts of why she went there, what she did, what she heard or didn't hear.
So one minute she heard nothing, the next.
The next, she claimed she heard scrapes and moans. Very contradictory. And crucially, Investigators did eventually check the barn.
Yay.
They found an undisturbed layer of dust covering the loft floor, suggesting pretty strongly that no one had actually been up there for days. Her alibi started to look very shaky.
Okay, so the alibi is crumbling. What else started pointing towards her?
Well, there was her very clear, very vocal disdain for Abby. Remember that quote? When asked about who might want to kill her mother.
Right, she immediately corrected them. She is not my mother. She is my stepmother. My mother is dead, showing that deep-seated resentment.
Exactly. And then the alarm bells really started ringing. Several witnesses came forward.
About what?
They revealed they'd seen Lizzie trying to buy prussic acid, which is a highly toxic form of cyanide, from a downtown pharmacy just weeks before the murders.
Whoa. Poison. Did she get it?
No, thankfully. The shopkeeper had refused to sell it to her without a prescription. But the attempt itself, highly suspicious.
You'd think so. So, with all this mounting, the inconsistencies, the motive, the poison attempt, they finally arrested her.
Yes, this mounting pile of suspicions and, vague but definitely incriminating details eventually led to Lizzie's arrest about a week after the murders.
A week later. That initial delay, that hesitation to suspect her, you really think that was mostly because of who she was?
It's widely seen that way, yeah. Her status as a white, wealthy woman in Victorian society played a huge role in her initially avoiding suspicion.
It just seems like society couldn't wrap its head around the idea, right? That a woman like Lizzie could commit such a brutal, violent act.
Precisely. You have to remember the context. Late 19th century, very rigid ideas about class and womanhood. Lizzie just didn't fit the profile of an axe murderer.
There was this idea about women embodying either good or evil.
Yeah, exactly. As one writer at the time put it, society saw men as capable of wrestling with both good and evil within themselves. But a woman, she could only really embody one or the other.
So a well-to-do white woman had to be good.
That was the underlying assumption. Her status gave her too many non-criminal features, as some analysis puts it. The public, and initially the police, they wanted a different kind of killer.
Someone masculine, probably poor, maybe foreign.
Yeah, maybe with an accent. Someone easily othered. Lizzie was none of those things.
And beyond just her perceived moral character, there was also significant doubt about her physical ability to do it, wasn't there?
Right.
Based purely on her gender.
Oh, absolutely. The sheer violence, the brutality of the murders, bashing and hacking the bodies even after they were clearly dead, it led the crime to be widely masculinized, as we said, in the public mind.
People just didn't think women murdered like that.
Generally, no. The accepted stereotype, if a woman did murder, especially a sort of femme fatale figure.
It would be poison, right? More subtle, less physical.
Exactly. Poison was seen as the woman's weapon, not a heavy, bloody axe. This idea that a woman couldn't commit such a physically brutal crime was really strong.
Even though a medical examiner actually stated a woman was physically capable.
Yeah, the medical examiner explicitly said it was possible. But that sentiment, that public perception, it just persisted. And it definitely helped shield Lizzie from suspicion early on.
But amidst all these prejudices working in her favor, there was one really strange theory that popped up, related specifically to women's bodies.
Ah, you mean the menstruation-caused madness ideal?
Yeah. It sounds bizarre to us now, but back then.
Oh, it was a recognized, albeit fringe, medical concept in the 19th century. Even some distinguished medical professionals believed that menstruation could trigger temporary psychosis, potentially leading to, or at least explaining, criminal behavior.
And how did that connect to the Borden case specifically?
Well, remember, the police found a pail containing some fresh blood in the basement of the Borden home.
Yet,
Lizzie attributed that, and also a small amount of blood found on one of her dresses, to her period. Menstrual blood.
and people just accepted that explanation.
What's fascinating is how little it was questioned, especially during the trial. It was barely mentioned, probably because of the strong societal taboos around discussing such, private female matters in a public courtroom.
So it was just kind of swept under the rug.
Pretty much. The defense only brought it up once, very briefly, to suggest why Lizzie might have seemed disturbed or maybe vacant during the initial police questioning right after the murders.
It's strange how that connects to modern times too, isn't it? The idea of PMS sometimes being used as a defense.
It's an interesting parallel, yeah. Even though modern medical doctrine generally advises against using it that way, the idea lingers.
Okay, so besides the menstruation theory, was there talk of her just being generally insane?
Yes, especially after her arrest, the local papers started toying with the insane woman theory. Before the arrest, the thought was only an insane man could do it. But once Lizzie was the suspect, the focus shifted.
But did they find any evidence of insanity?
Not really. Police interviews, talks with family, locals. They described her as, maybe ugly or odd, but there was no history of actual insanity. Nothing suggesting she was particularly evil either.
So the insanity angle didn't really stick.
No. And in a way, that almost cemented the belief in her innocence for many. Because if she wasn't insane, how could a proper middle-class woman, as they saw her, commit such violence?
It challenged their whole worldview.
Exactly. As one analyst put it, if Lizzie Borden was guilty, then perhaps any apparently proper middle-class woman might be equally capable of such violence. And that was a notion that Victorian society was deeply unwilling to accept.
It was too unsettling.
Deeply unsettling. So society resisted it fiercely.
Okay, so suspicions are mounting. Public opinion is the swirling vortex of rumor and bias. And then it's time for the trial. June 1893, right? Almost a year after the murders.
That's right. And right from the start, Lizzie's privilege, her status as a wealthy woman, played a huge role in her defense.
She could afford good lawyers.
She inherited half her father's estate, which was considerable. It meant she could hire an absolute dream team of lawyers. Her lead counsel, George Robinson, was not just skilled. He was a former Massachusetts governor.
A former governor. Wow.
Yes, and he had actually appointed one of the 3 judges presiding over her trial.
Talk about connections.
Right. His simple public endorsement of Lizzie's innocence carried enormous weight and significantly boosted her image before the trial even really got going.
Plus, the prosecution was already on the back foot because of the initial investigation.
Definitely. That poor police work we talked about. It gave the defense plenty of holes to poke in the prosecution's case from the outset.
And how did Lizzie herself behave in court? What was her strategy?
She really leaned into the role of the demure lady. Dressed appropriately, very modest, lots of weeping.
Playing the victim.
Playing the grieving daughter, certainly. And importantly, she remained silent throughout the trial, which was her constitutional right. She didn't testify.
So her appearance and her silence were her defense.
In many ways, yes. They were her greatest armor, as some historians have said. And she even famously fainted in the courtroom.
Oh yeah, when they brought out the skulls.
Exactly. When plaster casts of her father's and stepmother's crushed skulls were presented as evidence. Whether it was genuine or theatrics, it certainly caused a stir and probably garnered some sympathy.
So how did the prosecution try to counter this image?
Well, they focused their efforts on attacking her perceived womanhood, trying to paint her as unnatural. They implied she wasn't a respectable girl because she devalued the family unit, pointing to her negative treatment of Abby.
Did they try to establish a motive?
Yes, they pushed avarice and hatred. They suggested she killed her father and stepmother to prevent Andrew from potentially changing his will in Abby's favor, securing her inheritance. They even compared her to Lady Macbeth at one point.
Lady Macbeth. That seems risky.
Well, it backfired spectacularly, actually. By attacking her so aggressively, by comparing her to this famously villainous female figure, they inadvertently attacked the very notion of wealthy white femininity that the all-male jury, the media, and the public were so invested in protecting.
So attacking her femininity actually helped her?
In a strange way, yes. It made the jury, composed entirely of men from similar social standings, perhaps more inclined to defend that ideal.
So if the prosecution's attack backfired, how did the defense capitalize?
Oh, they pivoted brilliantly. Their strategy centered entirely on reinforcing her positive and pure femininity.
Not do that.
They painted her as this devout Christian, an involved member of the community, a loving daughter. They made a point of mentioning her father was buried wearing a ring she'd given him.
Pulling on the heartstrings.
Absolutely. And Lizzie supported this narrative with her courtroom demeanor, weeping openly when the murders were described. Her lawyers then appealed directly to the male stereotypes and perhaps insecurities of the jury.
In what way?
Robinson essentially argues that convicting a good, proper woman like Lizzie would somehow threaten traditional masculinity itself. It would undermine the whole structure, the sanctity of the patriarchal family unit, as the analysis puts it.
Wow. So they were basically telling the jury, acquit her to protect yourselves and your way of life. That's quite a gamble.
He was incredibly shrewd. They hammered on reasonable doubt, arguing that her identity, her status, her very womanhood made it almost inconceivable she could commit such a brutal act. They skillfully sidestepped the inconvenient facts, the inconsistencies.
The poison attempt, the barn alibi.
Exactly. and they floated the idea of an unknown male intruder, an assassin, effectively shifting all blame away from Lizzie.
And then there was the evidence that didn't make it to the jury, right? Key pieces were excluded.
Huge pieces.
Yeah.
The judges ruled to exclude Lizzie's contradictory testimony from the initial inquest, claiming it was involuntary because she was essentially held as a prisoner without a lawyer present at that time.
And the poison testimony?
Also excluded. The druggist's testimony about her trying to buy prussic acid was deemed inadmissible, likely seen as prejudicial or irrelevant to the murders themselves, since she didn't succeed in buying it.
Those were massive blows to the prosecution's case.
Absolutely massive. The deck felt heavily stacked against conviction by that point.
So the deliberation, it was quick, wasn't it?
Remarkably quick. The jury was out for about an hour, maybe an hour and a half, but the rumor was they actually reached a decision in as little as 10 minutes.
10 minutes after all that.
Yeah. They likely waited a bit longer, just for appearances. Then they came back. Not guilty on all counts.
And the reaction in the courtroom?
Cheers. Apparently there were cheers in the courtroom. It really underscored the immense power that perception, societal norms, and gender bias held over the factual evidence in this trial.
So Lizzie walks free, acquitted. But what kind of life did she actually live after that trial? Did she just fade away?
Oh, not at all. Not immediately, anyway. She and Emma inherited Andrew's wealth, which was substantial, nearly $500,000 back then in cash and real estate.
So they were very wealthy women.
Extremely.
Yeah.
And with that money, they bought a huge 14-room Queen Anne-style mansion, called it Maplecroft.
Maplecroft. And where was it located?
Right in the prestigious hill neighborhood of Fall River. Exactly the kind of upscale area Lizzie had apparently always wanted to live in. She'd finally arrived, socially speaking.
So she lived lavishly then, enjoying the high life after escaping such a huge scandal.
For a while, yes. She started going by the name Lizbeth, which sounds a bit more sophisticated maybe.
Lizzie Borden. Okay.
And she lived very comfortably. Traveled widely, loved attending the theater, hosted parties, had a large staff of servants at Maplecroft.
But was she accepted by Fall River society after everything?
Ah, that's the catch. No. She faced significant public ostracism. Most residents, including people who were once her friends, even members of her church, they largely avoided her, shunned her, really.
So whispers and sidelong glances.
And worse, Maplecroft was apparently targeted by local school children who would throw things at the house, yell taunts.
So the public verdict was different from the legal one, and the scandals didn't completely end with the trial, did they? There was more trouble later.
No, they didn't. In 1897, a few years later, she was accused of shoplifting again, this time in Providence, Rhode Island.
Seriously? After inheriting all that money?
Yeah. She wasn't charged, but the accusation alone further isolated her. And then, perhaps the biggest personal blow came in 1905.
What happened then?
Her sister Emma, who had been her lifelong confidant, her ally through everything, Emma moved out of Maplecroft. Permanently.
Why? What caused the split?
Emma later cited absolutely unbearable conditions. Most accounts attribute the final break to Lizzie's very close relationship with an actress named Nance O'Neill.
An actress. And the relationship was...
Controversial.
There were widespread rumors and gossip suggesting it was a romantic, possibly sexual relationship, and maybe even that O'Neill was exploiting Lizzie financially. Whatever the truth, it drove Emma away. And they never reconciled.
Never. Lizzie and Emma remained estranged right up until their deaths.
Wow. A truly complex and ultimately quite sad life after the acquittal. So when did Lizzie die?
Lizzie died in 1927 at age 66. And then just that a week later, Emma died too.
So close together, even after being estranged.
Yeah, quite poignant. Both sisters are buried near their parents and stepmother in Fall River. But of course, the murders themselves officially remain unsolved.
Which is a huge part of why the story endures, right? That lack of definitive closure.
Absolutely. It fuels the speculation, the mystery. And Lizzie herself became this almost mythical figure, didn't she?
She really did. A kind of feminine icon for some, but also, despite the acquittal, a cult murderess for others.
Yeah, inspiring countless cultural spinoffs, the rhyme, of course, but also movies, TV shows, plays. Some try to be factual, some are radically feminist interpretations, others are just pure imagination.
And this evolution of her legend, it also brings up that problematic femme fatale image again, doesn't it?
It really does. It's like society replaced one stereotype, the pure, incapable woman, with another. The sexually deviant, dangerous woman who breaks norms. And we still see echoes of that today in how the media treats certain women accused of crimes.
You mean like Casey Anthony or Amanda Knox? That kind of intense scrutiny and often sexualized villainization?
Exactly, those kinds of examples. So the focus on Lizzie shifted over time. It became less about if she did it and more about why she was acquitted. The big question became, was her wealthy white womanhood enough to buy innocence in the face of a growing pile of guilt?
And that question really brings us squarely back to the modern implications of gender and crime. You mentioned earlier how Lizzie's status, her gender, her class played a role in that delayed suspicion and maybe the acquittal. How do those historical biases show up today?
Well, unfortunately, studies consistently show that gendered biases haven't vanished from the judicial system. There's still evidence suggesting preferential treatment for women in some contexts.
Like more lenient sentences, lower conviction rates for the same crimes compared to men.
Yeah, things like that. It's often linked to this lingering idea of chivalry, a paternalistic impulse, perhaps, to protect women, even those accused of crimes.
So, how do criminological theories help us understand this, especially looking back at Lizzie's case? You mentioned four key theories. Let's start with masculinity theory.
Okay, so masculinity theory basically suggests that crime, especially violent crime, is intrinsically linked in our society's mind with masculinity. Therefore, individuals who present as feminine are less likely to be seen as capable of violence and potentially less likely to be convicted.
Which definitely seems to fit Lizzie's situation in the very sex-segregated 1800s. People struggled to picture a middle-class woman wielding an axe.
Exactly. Now, opportunity theory is slightly different. It posits that people, including women who have more legitimate socioeconomic opportunities, are less likely to resort to violent crime.
But how does that apply to Lizzie? She came from wealth, but as a 19th century woman, her autonomous opportunities were limited, right?
Precisely. And that actually became a motive for the prosecution. They argued her lack of independent opportunity, combined with the desire for the family wealth she couldn't earn herself, drove her to murder. So opportunity theory cut both ways in her case.
Okay, then there's marginalization theory.
Right. This theory suggests that women who are marginalized in society due to race, sexuality, poverty, etc., are more likely to be associated with and convicted of violent crime.
And Lizzie was the opposite of marginalized.
Exactly. Her race, her high socioeconomic status, these factors definitely benefited her. The public, the jury, they didn't want to disrupt their comfortable Victorian assumptions by convicting someone who looked like their own daughters or sisters.
And finally, the chivalry theory, which seems incredibly relevant here.
Hugely relevant.
Yeah.
The chivalry theory essentially argues that there's probably more female criminality out there than official conviction statistics show, because many guilty women might get acquitted or receive lighter treatment due to this societal desire, often subconscious, to protect perceived fragile feminine figures.
Especially with an all-male jury like Lizzie had.
Especially then. That impulse to protect, that chivalry, however misplaced, was likely a powerful factor in her acquittal.
And tying all these theories together, there's the broader historical context you mentioned. Early feminism was just starting to emerge.
Right, which made the traditional image of womanhood feel a bit vulnerable, perhaps. Convicting Lizzie, a prominent woman from a good family, of such a brutal crime would have, as one analysis puts it, inflicted another dent upon the pureness of the feminine image.
And by extension, threatened the whole patriarchal structure.
Potentially, yes. It would have battered the sanctity of the patriarchal family unit. So you could argue the jury of men who acquitted Lizzie weren't just acquitting her. They might have also been protecting themselves and their established notions of the proper, subjugated female role within society.
So after delving into all of this, the crime, the trial, the biases, the theories, where does it leave us?
Well, officially, the Lizzie Borden murders remain unsolved. But as we've seen, the truth of the case has become entirely secondary to the myth of it.
Exactly. The story took on a life of its own. And it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How much do narratives and perceptions, especially those shaped by these deeply ingrained biases about gender, class, or other identities, how much do they continue to influence our understanding of crime, justice, and even truth itself? Maybe even more than the cold, hard facts sometimes.
It's a crucial question, and it leads to another one. What historical truths, or even current ones, might we still be clinging to today, simply because they fit comfortably with our societal norms, rather than aligning with the actual messy evidence?
Definitely something to mull over long after this deep dive ends.